Real quick, this is my first attempt at a video essay, and honestly, it's not very good. Still give it a chance though, but I just made it more as a proof of concept to myself that I could make a video essay. So bear that in mind when you watch it. Alright, enjoy the video. The day was November 12th, 2019. On this day, a game was about to release that could change and define its genre for years to come. It was a spin off of the most influential roguelike ever, a game that defined what roguelikes were and made them the huge successes that they are today. This game was poised to follow in its footsteps and breathe fresh air into its genre, which was considered unable to be nothing more than mindless drivel. This game would redefine it and make it a more complex game requiring deep thought, adding a new layer of challenge in depth and expanding it in new ways that previously weren't thought possible, reforming a mindless mobile game into an enriching experience with one of the most unique and charming art styles of any game, reaching 9 out of 10 reviews on Steam and having an incredibly hyped release. This game was quickly forgotten, but why? It had all the elements to take the world by storm. What went wrong? This is the story of how the Legend of Bumbo tried and failed to be the Binding of Isaac. Before we discuss the Legend of Bumbo, we need to discuss the Binding of Isaac and what it is. However, we won't be discussing any of the core gameplay, the art style, the music, the specific mechanics, as those aren't what makes the game unique and special. I mean, they are, but they're not what we need to analyze today. We'll be discussing three things about it: its unlock system, its replay value, and how every run is different. Because that is what truly makes Isaac Isaac. The Binding of Isaac is the most replayable game of all time, and I don't even think there's any room for debate about that. The only games that come close are sandbox games, but I personally think Isaac takes the cake here. This is for many reasons, one being its unlock system. You can never truly finish Isaac. There are hundreds of items to unlock, and getting everything would take several hours, hundreds of hours. You have to beat every ending with every character, complete every challenge, as well as do dozens of other things just to beat the game. And then the game gets harder the more you play it, so each unlock has relatively similar difficulty despite increasing player experience. Another reason that no two runs in Isaac are ever going to be the same is that you are constantly discovering new interactions and synergies with every playthrough, meaning the game never gets stale. Not only is the combination of what items or resources you have and what enemies you're facing never going to be the same by the mid or end of the game, but there's more factors combined, and that makes it an ever-changing, never-staling game that you can play as much as you want, but you will never finish it, and it will never grow old. A lot of games people stop playing because the gameplay grows stale or you run out of content, but this can never happen for The Binding of Isaac. The Legend of Bumbo has similar randomization and unlocks, so why isn't it the same? First of all, it does not have the same scale as Isaac. Isaac has several characters, dozens of bosses, hundreds of different items and enemies, thousands of rooms, different unlockable areas, and endings that you can choose from. To contest this, Bumble has like 5 characters, around 13 bosses, not too many items or rooms, no branching paths, and only one end goal. In a lot of runs, you will get the same items over and over again, and when I play it, I often recognize specific room layouts. Furthermore, because of the general sameness in Bumbo, once you beat the game with one character and you feel like you've just beaten it, it's done. And the unlock requirements for almost everything in the game is just beating the game a certain amount of times with a specific character, meaning you're effectively just doing the same thing over and over again. There are challenge unlocks for each character where you beat the game with a certain amount of coins. Most players will never realize this and never attempt to complete these challenges. The game tries to have the Isaac replay value, but it doesn't have the same scale as Isaac, and it feels small, empty, and repetitive. Furthermore, the game is a lot slower paced than Isaac, whereas in Isaac you will go through several short rooms on each floor. In this game, you will go through a few long rooms on each floor, meaning the crazy unique situations happen less often in The Legend of Bumbo. Bumbo also fails in other areas where it tries to be Isaac. For example, its items. In the Binding of Isaac, most items are passive, meaning two things. One, they passively interact and build off of each other, meaning they are constantly interacting and leading to synergies and anti-synergies. For example, one time I got three seemingly useless items in the Binding of Isaac. An item that made my bombs into rockets, which would shoot forward, an item that leaves a small green damaging puddle below your bombs, and an item which lets you manually detonate these bombs. All of these bombs are awful on their own, but when they combined, I got homing like tracer missiles that didn't do damage through their explosions, but they left deadly green creep behind that followed the enemies around, turning three weak items into something incredibly strong. Passive items are also constantly changing how your game plays. For example, when you get faster, that changes your movement. When you shoot faster, that changes how the timing between shots. But in Bumbo, this doesn't really happen. In the Legend of Bumbo, uh, you, most items are manually triggered and do not affect in this way. The Binding of Isaac, you get a lot of passive items, which can change your gameplay in ways that aren't just stats, like flying over obstacles, allowing for damage boosting, or melee combat. But Bumbo just does not have anything that fundamentally changes the gameplay. And as I said, most items are active, meaning they do not interact with each other fundamentally in the same ways as the others. Furthermore, in Legend of Bumbo, runs are shorter and items have a maximum amount, meaning you really just value items individually rather than as a group. When you get a bad passive item, it doesn't influence you that much, but it still changes how the game plays, even if just a little bit. Or if you get a bad active item, it just doesn't you just don't use it. And that's a big problem when most of your items are actives, meaning a bad item is just not getting an item. So you do not get the crazy synergy or ever changing gameplay. But there are passive items in Bumbo, and some of them are good, like the trinkets. But there's so few and far between that it doesn't matter. You know? Like for example, in this, I've been playing the game for 7 minutes and I have not gotten a single trinket in this footage, meaning that my gameplay hasn't changed and it is still fundamentally the same. Furthermore, most of the passive boosts in the Legend of Bumbo are stat increases, which means that most of the time, right, when you get a permanent passive boost, it will not fundamentally change your gameplay because it will just make you better at what you do. There are some exceptions, but you doing more damage doesn't change how you play. I mean, it changes it a little bit by making bones better than teeth, but that's about all. There are exceptions. The speed up is good, or there are boosts to your spells, but that just makes your spells better at what they do or easier to access, which doesn't fundamentally change the spell at all. These make you stronger, yeah, but they don't change your gameplay like most passive boosts do. Lastly, Bumbo is rushed and unfinished. This is its main issue because the previous issues you can look past, but the Legend of Bumbo is very rushed, very unfinished. You can see this in many ways, but I will use the most obvious example I can think of, the 7 match animations. When you match 7 of a kind, different mana has different effects and special animations. Bones and Teeth have unique effects with amazing animations, where Bones have the camera pan up to reveal a skeleton which rains several bones down on all the enemies, and the Teeth has a giant jaw of teeth slammed shut on all enemies for one big attack for big damage to all enemies. These are not only fun to watch but interesting to use. making them incredibly rewarding and as well as deep because they both have the pros and cons that reflect how the smaller versions of the matches work. With bones, you throw one bone when you match four, but you get to throw a second bone when you match five, and a third when you match six. The skeleton raining bones on all enemies is not only satisfying, but also the next continuation of that steps because it keeps the strengths and weaknesses. Bones' strengths and weaknesses compared to teeth relies on the fact that they will hit multiple times, which is better for some enemies and worse for others. And having a lot of bones rain down on a bunch of enemies randomly perfectly encapsulates the strength against the enemies that you want to hit multiple times and the weaknesses against the ones that you don't want to hit multiple times. The teeth also have this where, the teeth do a large amount of damage to every enemy at once. So if you have an enemy, like, for example, Duke of Flies, bones are better than teeth because you want to hit him multiple times to increase his damage vulnerability. But on Gizadia, conversely, you will want to hit with teeth instead of bones because bones will you will get one bone hit and then they will switch phases, which keeps the complexity of teeth versus bones. So this is good so far. Now when you get to the net other matches though, they lose this formula. There are two similar tiles with a dichotomy similar to bones and teeth, which is the boogers and the poop, which are both defensive options. If you match seven boogers, the room literally floods with snot, stunning all enemies for 3 turns. This is effectively the same as like the teeths, but with boogers. However, this doesn't reflect the strengths and weaknesses of boogers compared to poop, because poop are more equivalent than the bones. You get to or more equivalent to the teeth. You get to throw more snot the more snot you match, but less but poop only goes on one lane, but is generally better. Now, when you match, but you could not care about because the depth, for bones and teeth, what makes them fundamentally different from each other are these aforementioned strengths and weaknesses, where that is not the same because boogers and poop are fundamentally different from each other. However, they generally shows to me that they're less thought out because if you match seven boogers, it could literally just be the same as six if you're facing one enemy, which is not satisfying for the player. Seven matches should be incredibly satisfying to use because they're generally a reward for good gameplay and planning, as well as just the fun of the game. A lot of the fun of the game comes from getting big matches, so it is important to make them satisfying. So what's next? Yeah, so for poop, there's no special animation, which is it just falls from the sky and makes three poop in each shrine, which is problematic to me for two reasons. One, there's no animation, which is bad because, there is an animation, but the camera pans up a little, a couple poops fall down from the sky, but it's really underwhelming. But second, it's incredibly poorly balanced, and balancing is a huge issue for the whole game because um, with the balancing of the game, it's just bad. Okay, obviously, if this is the cut I end up using, I just want to stress that this is more of a test for how well a video essay can do. Like everything's bad about this. My mic quality, my script. This is just I want to see if I can make a video essay. So That's why it's poor quality. Anyway, should not be doing this, but whatever. No one's gonna watch this far. Now, for the last core piece of Mana P, it has no special animation whenever you match seven. It just gives you one free move or one extra free move compared to matching six, but it also adds an additional charge to each of your spells, signified by a pop-up effect. This is lazy for two reasons. One, P is the weakest mana, but is ultimately the most satisfying to get value out of, as it has potentially the most powerful effect, so it's inherently rewarding to get value out of and make large changes if you do. Having it be the only basic animation or mana with no animation when you match 7 is incredibly unsatisfying. It takes the piss out of it because it doesn't exemplify the gameplay at all. The others feel incredibly satisfying to use because they're powerful effects and satisfying animations, but the piss has neither. Its effect is only as useful as the others if you are intentionally stalling to get repeated benefits from a charge item which you may not even have, making it not satisfying or able to use and not able to turn the tides of battle, effectively being the opposite of what makes urinating so fun in this game. And it gets worse with the other mana. There are other rare mana, which means it makes players curious what happens in match 7. Doing so is usually not optimal, it just serves as a reward for curious players. So what happens if you do match 7 of the rare other mana? Cards give no other animation and have a decently powerful effect, giving a boost that lasts more than the fight but does not change the tide of battle. This effect is fine, but not even having anything really special happens makes it not worth the rarity. Hearts are rare, but always present. This is the definitive rare event that the player is going to have in the back of their mind for a long time until they finally set this up and there's no reward. What's the point? And it gets worse with the other tiles. Matching 7 curse tiles is literally the same as matching 6, which doesn't serve to reward curious players and doesn't feel sufficiently punishing to do what is ultimately a very avoidable death. Just, oh, I'm dead, big whoop, you know? If there was an animation, like let's say the Grim Reaper himself emerges from the ground and takes your soul, instantly killing you, this serves two purposes. It rewards curious players for going out of their way to find a funny death animation, and it gives you a fun animation if you genuinely die to this, because this death is incredibly avoidable and honestly funny. This it will almost never happen that you will almost never die to it in the normal round, and taking 2 hearts of damage is effectively equivalent to instant death in most cases anyway. Lastly, there are wild tiles, which are incredibly rare, using only being made by the player usually. Matching 4 of these tiles is near impossible, much less 7. So what happens if the player somehow finds a way to match them? Nothing! I don't need to explain why this sucks. The same goes for splat tiles, which I had to Google what they did because I never bothered to even try matching them. There are so many other cases of the game clearly being rushed, unfinished, and shallow, demonstrating its lack of depth as a result. But I chose this example because it also tells the player not to explore interactions and discourages creativity, promising that you will get nothing in return for your curiosity, which is a huge problem in a game that is trying to be the Binding of Isaac, a game in which fun interactions, secrets, and synergies are still being discovered to this day. In conclusion, The Legend of Bumbo fundamentally fails at being the Binding of Isaac because it is too small, shallow, does not have the unpredictability or depth Isaac has, and it is clearly a result of the game being rushed and unfinished. And I find, and this is kind of sad because this game has promise. It has a lot it has incredibly solid core gameplay, and it is very fun, but it ultimately does not follow up on any of its ideas and does not have enough content to justify extended playtime. This game could have been big. It could have been the next Isaac, but it ultimately wasn't. As always, make sure to subscribe to join the TRC Wolf Warriors. Arrgh! That's so fucking stupid. Fucking howling. It's the worst outro. Anyway, bye.